it is my sad duty to announce that Renew itself, Michael Vickerman, is going to be retiring this spring after 30 plus years with the organization. I thought a lot about what I wanted to say about Michael, and no words of justice could come to mind. So thankfully, I asked my good friend Don Wickert, co-founder of Renew, to come up and say a few words in my place, because I will probably get emotional if I try to do that. So please welcome Don Wickert.
This is going to be brief. Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Michael, for 33 years or so being sort of the face of Renew. Just going back, through a number of serendipitous events, I was able to start Renew back in 1990. And one of the first things I did was to hire Michael Vickerman. We were lucky enough to get a intervenor grant from the Public Service Commission. And what Michael did was he took 29 different perspectives from renewable energy into a 600-page packet and presented it to the Public Service Commission. And this completely turned the state upside down in terms of what they thought about renewable energy. Before that, there really hadn't been much going on with Renew. And then for the next 20 years, Michael mostly single-handedly did everything that the 11 or 12 people of the Renew staff do today. He came up with grant ideas, he came up with the grants, he did the work, he did the reports, he lobbied. He was at the policy table almost every day, which is a key thing to occur if you're going to make change over a lot of time. So to go over all of Michael's accomplishments over a 30-year career, it would take us weeks. I think a couple things that have withstood the test of time is Michael was involved in getting renewable energy included in the Focus on Energy program. So if anyone has ever gotten a grant or works in this field, you have Michael to thank for it. The other major thing that he did was to get a renewable energy standard of 10% in the state, which we hadn't done before. We were at about 2%. Michael was able to get it up to 10%, which has had a huge impact in terms of large utility scale projects. So after 20 years in showing up every day, and I'm reminded of the Woody Allen story where 90% of anything is just showing up, and Michael did that for 20 years as executive director. After 20 years, he said, you know, I'd really like to focus on just policy issues if possible. So I was at a stage where I was able to step in for Michael on an interim basis for about a year and a half. And one of the things that I had to do was fundraising. I hadn't done a lot of fundraising in the past. So I hired Dave Shizlevich to help me fundraise. And I asked Dave, I said, when we go out to potential funders, what are the themes? How are we going to spin this? He said, I've got advice for you, Don. 2 words, Michael Vickerman. He said, Michael Vickerman is the face of renewable energy in Wisconsin. And all you have to do is say his name and people know where you're coming from. So I'd like to end with a short haiku. Haiku is 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables, so it worked out. Renew Wisconsin, that's 5 syllables. He was there for the long haul, 7 syllables, Michael Vickerman. And it's my pleasure now to invite Michael Vickerman, who has had his hand in everything, knows probably every project in the state, knows everybody who was involved in that project. This guy has an incredible memory. If there was ever a contest, a Jeopardy contest for renewable energy in Wisconsin, he would be the person who would be up there for weeks. It's my pleasure to introduce Michael Vickerman.
Oh, no. I feel like I'm channeling my inner Steve Colbert. Everybody sit down. Thank you. Thanks for that wonderful summary, Don. That was kind of moving, I have to say. We did cover a lot of ground in these 30 years. And the biggest accomplishment of your introduction was to cut a couple pages out of my speech. So everybody thanks you for that. Yeah, this is a very bittersweet moment for me, even though we all knew that a day like this would come, but it's time for me to move on to the next stage of my life. And so as of mid-April, I will officially retire as a staff member of this very wonderful organization. It certainly has been quite a ride, to say the least. But I'm glad Don was here to talk about Renew's origin story. I will just add that I got that job basically by responding to an ad in the newspaper, a want ad. Has anybody gotten a job that way anymore? I might have been the last person to have started my career answering a want ad in the newspaper. And as Don mentioned, our first assignment, our first undertaking was to intervene in what's called the Advanced Plan. It was the sixth one, and that was back in the day. This is going way back when Wisconsin actually practiced integrated resource planning. That stopped more than 20 years ago. And then another part of my job, because eventually the funding ran out, was to go and look for other sources of funding and other opportunities where we could continue advocating on behalf of Wisconsin's renewable energy resources, which at that time basically consisted of landfill gas generation, small hydro projects, and the occasional, we'll call it refuse incinerator. There was no wind then. There was no solar. Actually, there was no wind generation in the upper Midwest until 1994 of any consequence. And that was the Buffalo Ridge project that brought utility-scale wind generation to the upper Midwest. It was at least something to point to, even if it was in another state. But looking for those opportunities, that was how we survived what I call the wilderness years. Where I could talk a lot more about that, but just to say that for the first 10 years, I was basically Renew's staff, entire staff. My wife used to say to me, if Renew downsizes, you'll be the first to know. All right, so the historian in me, you probably didn't want to hear that phrase, the historian in me can't help but just document in just a few slides how far we've gone. All right. Here we go. So that's a scene from, we'll say, 2000, 2001. Y2K was a kind of a break point for us. What you're looking at is a two-turbine wind project that We Energies built back in 2019 called Byron. The total capacity was 1.3 megawatts. And this served a green pricing program. This was not a rate-based project, but rather it was supported by premiums paid by self-selecting customers of We Energies. So We Energies would organize these tours of the project. You can see a bunch of us basically kicking the tires here of this exotic technology. Byron served its purpose well for 20 years, but as we know, technology marches on, And by 2019, it had outlived its usefulness. So, now this is a photo from this year, but you have two different projects with two very different vintages. So we see the Montfort wind farm in the distance. That was commissioned 2 years later. Just in 2 years' time, those turbines had grown to 1.5 megawatts, and there were 20 of them instead of 2. Okay, so things were developing quickly. Now let's look at the solar field in the foreground. The Badger Hollow Solar Park, developed by Invenergy, one of our presenting sponsors, is Wisconsin's largest source of renewable power. It will generate more than 10 times the output from Montfort's turbines in the distance. Now, the first two slides I just showed you capture clean energy's journey from a boutique offering to a mainstream source of power. What you see in Badger Hollow is a power plant. Imagine that. We didn't think about renewables as power plants back in 1993. It's a power plant fueled by sunshine, and in 2023, Wisconsin saw 8 other plants like this commissioned across the state, feeding electricity directly into the grid. But as I'll show you, solar isn't just for grid use only. The scalable nature of solar generation accommodates installation activity and robust interest at the individual customer level. And today, I was a solar customer. I still am a solar customer. I bought my household solar customer in 2008. It cost about $8 a watt. So these are probably closer to $3 a watt. So these customers today don't have to be affluent to access solar for their own use. It's become an affordable option for any household or business with a largely unshaded roof. Here's an example of one in Omro. And so solar's favorable economics allow nonprofits and low to moderate income households to venture into this space so long as they own their own dwellings. So clearly, the clean energy industry has grown and has become a significant economic force in Wisconsin, driving several billion dollars in investment each year into solar, wind, storage, microgrids, heat pumps, and energy efficiencies throughout the state. I could not have foreseen this result 30 years ago, or even 20 years ago. Another metric of our industry's growth in Wisconsin can be found in this very conference, in this very room. When we kicked off the inaugural Renewable Energy Summit back in 2012, we drew an audience of maybe 140 people. Someone said today, many of them retired. And they were packed into a much smaller venue, the Pyle Center, though it had a very nice view of Lake Mendota. So at that time, this was in one of our more difficult periods. We're actually being bullied by the Wisconsin state government, who somehow thought that renewable energy was radioactive. Our first summit had overtones of a primal scream, which was, understandable then. But now, look at how this event has taken off. So notwithstanding these setbacks, a decade ago, I could not have foreseen back in 2012 the evolution of this summit into the highly anticipated event it is today, with more than 700 people registering, more than 100 sponsors, and 60 exhibitors. Renewed summits are now powered by the goals and aspirations of a clearly growing community who are committed to the clean energy enterprise in one fashion or another. And few things give me more pride and satisfaction than reflecting on the growth of this community and its prospects for the future. And the final metric I'll cite is Renew's staff and how it has grown and evolved over the years, from a boutique operation with just me in the office to the humming hive of activity that it is today. In the last 10 years, Renew's staff grew substantially under the leadership of Tyler Hubner and Heather Allen, bringing on new people to work on events and communications, regulatory proceedings, electric vehicles, office management, legislative outreach. And last fall, we hired a staff attorney for the first time in our history, and it is already paying dividends on our advocacy. And it's, to me, amply clear that this is the strongest staff lineup that Renew has fielded to date. So I'm proud to be part of a team that includes Sam, Jody, Andrew, Beata, Ishmael, Ori, Lauren, Alex, Julia, Kim, Aisha, and Mike. And to Renew's Board of Directors and Renew's 1,800 members and supporters, I greatly enjoyed working with you over all the years, and I wish you and Renew the best of success going forward. While I will certainly miss the vibe at 214 North Hamilton Street, I don't intend to withdraw from Wisconsin's clean energy scene anytime soon. I've grown quite attached to it, in fact, and probably so for the rest of my life. And so with that, the time has come for the social hour, to which you are all invited. Fancy that. Thank you for joining us on this very fine day, and please join us on the Grand Terrace for some tasty snacks and thirst-quenching beverages. Thank you very much.